Okay, we have come to our last session of the day. And there's several slight changes to the program. We'll have Michael Jones Corea speak as in the program, but Hugh Lagrange is not here. In his place, we may say a few things about the French situation in regard to this topic. And then instead of Romain Garvey, we're going to have Therese O'Toole talk today, and Romain, I think, there's a change from my program, but not your program. Yeah. So we're going to start with, the topic of this session is youth and violence. We're going to start with Michael Jones Corea from Cornell University Political Science Department.
Je vous remercie pour l'invitation à la conférence à Paris 8, Paris. And that's all I'm going to say in French, because otherwise I would embarrass myself, and that would be more than you would want. But I did want to say thank you, both to the conference organizers and to all of you here in the audience. I was asked to speak about youth and violence, and you can see from the title, I'm going to be talking about immigrant contexts and ethnic violence. So I want to say right away that I'm not going to be talking at all about, well, I'm not going to be really focusing on youth. We'll be talking about violence. So I want to also begin by clarifying what we mean by violence. So there's all different kinds of violence. We talk about, say, everyday crime. We talk about sort of low-level individual one-on-one violence, say everyday scuffles, crime, hate crime, and I'm not going to be talking about that either. So I want to be clear again, what I'm not talking about is I'm not talking about most of what I was asked to talk about. Instead, I'm going to be talking about these sort of more dramatic, episodic, mass kinds of inter-ethnic violence that you think of as being civil disturbances or riots, depending on how you think about it. And it's these that have been the research that I've done in the past and what is going to be the topic of the talk today. So, yes. So these are the 5 factors that I'm going to be talking about throughout this presentation. That's different choices of how to think about mass inter-ethnic violence. So the factors that explain this, we think about them as being caused or shaped by demographic dispersal versus concentration. Do we think of ethnic violence as being shaped by spatial mismatch or access to the social structure? Do we think about it as being shaped by rapid demographic change or slow change? Do we think about it as being, again, caused or shaped by discrimination or acceptance? And lastly, by overlap, so whether ethnic groups overlap in the same geographic space or by ethnic segregation. And it turns out that on most of these, not all of these, there's quite a lot of disagreement about how these different factors shape ethnic violence. So this one, discrimination versus acceptance, is the easiest because almost everyone agrees that you get ethnic violence when you have some form of unequal treatment. So you have some groups that are insiders, some groups that are outsiders. You have to have that kind of fundamental inequality before you get ethnic violence, this kind of mass mobilization. Everyone is happy with each other and they mutually accept each other, then you're very unlikely to have ethnic violence in this mass level. That's pretty clear. So I want to move to talk about dispersal versus concentration. I realize this is, well, anyway. One hypothesis is that collective violence is less likely if you have demographic dispersal, so that you need some kind of concentration, ethnic concentration for ethnic violence, this kind of mass mobilization to occur. Right? So some immigrant groups are more demographically dispersed than others. So in the United States, for instance, South Asian Indians are highly dispersed. Other groups in the US and in Europe are very highly concentrated. And we've had some discussion of that in the first panel today. So it makes so one hypothesis, again, it makes a difference whether you're concentrated or dispersed. But I want to complicate this a little bit, and it came up again in the earlier panel in two ways. One, that it's saying that ethnic violence doesn't occur if you're dispersed. It's not necessarily true for this kind of individual level violence. So you can still have hate crimes and other kinds of ethnically targeted violence if one is ethnically dispersed, if one is a member of a group that's ethnically dispersed. Of course, in France, this is not the issue. You have, again, some disagreement in today's discussions about whether one would consider immigration settlement in the Ile-de-France region to be dispersed or concentrated. I tend to lean toward the view that what you have in the Ile-de-France region is a fairly concentrated immigrant population. And again, this is another representation of this. But it's not always clear that this kind of demographic concentration always matters. So sometimes we worry about ethnic concentration, but other times we don't. And I want to think about sort of why is it that we worry about some kinds of ethnic concentration? So in the discussion about London, for instance, much of the attention is on South Asians and Afro-Caribbean descendants of immigrants or immigrants. But there are other groups which are relatively invisible. They may be ethnically concentrated, we simply don't pay a lot of attention to them. So why is that? Why is it that some forms of concentration become less relevant for us as sociologists or political scientists? Is concentration itself a problem, or is it some forms of concentration? And of course, it matters. Concentration is of lower socioeconomic groups, so groups that have lower socioeconomic standing. And again, you're more likely to see this as a concentration as a kind of pathology or worry about ethnic violence. Because again, you can have concentration of high socioeconomic standing, groups of high socioeconomic standing, and we worry less about that. So it's not necessarily the concentration itself is the issue here. So the second area is this question of spatial mismatch. The hypothesis here is that isolation from job opportunities in particular increases the likelihood of this collective ethnic violence. And so there's quite a lot written about spatial mismatch. Here, in the French case, part of the explanation was that, of course, the built environment of the banlieue, lack of access to transportation and jobs, helped to explain this collective ethnic violence that took place, say, in 2005. And you have people like William Julius Wilson writing earlier in the United States about central cities. He was arguing that black unemployment in central cities was again caused by the spatial mismatch between where